What is up, everyone? So I wanted to cover something that I have developed and fleshed out over time and have advocated for a while in criminal justice theory, and it's something that I guess has just been an interest of mine generally because my focus when I was in law school was criminal law theory, and the like. And I am someone who really does not like the death penalty. And that isn't to say that I am against self-defense that leads to death. I just, when it comes to, that is, the death penalty, I just find that there is an inherent danger with the death penalty, especially when it comes to making mistakes, and especially when it comes to, uh, you know, remediation and other types of solving of the problems. There is an emotional element to why someone would want the death penalty, and that I can definitely understand. Um, but I would think that the wisest thing to do in terms of avoiding uh, deaths that are accidental or mistaken or malicious um, would be to avoid the death penalty as an immediate and direct thing, and instead have a type of waiting period for certain high-end crimes. And when I say high-end crimes, I'm talking about someone who has a very premeditated murder, serial killer, serial rapist, the type of stuff that is very grand in terms of harms. Maybe it was someone who set off a bomb somewhere at a school or something like that. We're talking about people that are like high-level aggravated battery, multiple aggravated battery, which aggravated battery is like serious bodily injury. So imagine someone's going around with a machete and starts like stabbing 5 people, or someone who murders 2 people, or someone who goes around and like rapes 5 women or something like that. Um, if there are these kinds of people who are that high level of criminal action, I think that a great option is to offer a waiting period for exoneration, possibly 1 to 2 years. And again, this is all subjective. This is just a policy. It's not. There's nothing closer to mandatory in terms of ethics for libertarianism, but this is just a possible policy for thought. And after that exoneration period, giving time to see if there's other evidence for this person, then that person gets sent off to a very basic and secured island. And you're like, wow, that kind of sounds like the Hunger Games. And yes, exactly. It would be that kind of idea. And that is that someone who has acted that barbaric is being sent back to the jungle, effectively. You're being sent back in time to live as a barber. And I'm not saying barber in terms of hair clippers. I'm talking about, the euphemism for someone who is a brute. And the idea here is that in sending somebody back to this island, you're not having a finality as to this person's life. This person, you can send them with some basic kind of supplies. And of course, this is all paid for voluntarily. And if I was advocating this is not something that's forced. And I think there's actually market incentives. I'll explain this in just a moment. You'll think this is crazy, but I think there's some good marketing incentives. So this kind of secluded island is just a place where they're sent. And it's open. There's no caretakers in terms of like, oh, a jail guard or something like that. The island is just secured so that it's far away enough for everything that nobody's going to escape. It's just too far to be like, oh, I'm going to swim over. It's not like Cuba in the United States, somewhere far out. But it's enough to be sustainable. In other words, this person could live there, but they have to take care of themselves. And if they don't, go back to basics and start taking care of themselves, then, they may die, but that's up to that person if they want to continue to live. And basically the idea is that this abstracts the person who's committed the harms from society as a whole. And I'm not saying society is a mandatory thing. I'm saying society as in it abstracts this person from the environment that they were in, so that the possibility of recidivism, and if you're not familiar with the term, it means the person can attack again, or that's likely, and that's where I'm saying these great harms, someone who does something that's premeditated, someone who does something that's serial, we expect a higher chance that this person is going to commit those actions again. That's the biggest scare with people, is they don't want this person to do that again. And of course, again, I'll also put out there, that's not proof they would. Just because someone kills 10 people doesn't mean they're going to necessarily kill an 11th. But the idea is that that's enough evidence for people to say, we don't want this person around, this is too dangerous. So diving into the market incentives for this, beyond the obvious, we have this person abstracted, this person, hasn't been killed, but that's it. This is their effective punishment. And in some ways, that's to try to, satisfy a retributive sense, people's emotional, heart, like, oh, I just want this person to suffer to feel how I feel. Obviously, if there's a deceased, they can't feel it. But, maybe family, friends, people who knew that person. So it's trying to satisfy, to an extent, those things without actually furthering the harm of more death by forcing more death. And I imagine that if this island were to be a construct that favored market forces, right? I imagine it would be like the Hunger Games, where there would be cameras and also like stuff outside, and people could watch and see and know who was in there as a means of a checks and balances. Unlike a lot of what goes on in the criminal justice system, you can't really, as a regular Joe Schmo, you don't get a camera's eye view typically into jails. You don't get a chance to be like, oh, what's actually happening in jails today? I mean, sure, you can go visit. You might be able to get into a private meeting room or something like that to meet someone who's incarcerated. But there's not like a webcam service, like a beachfront cam where you can be like, oh, I get to see what's happening in jails every day, and I really get a sense of what's going on. I think that having that with this type of isolation island would be excellent, because it would be an opportunity for people to actually see what is happening to this person, and to be involved with the thought process as to whether or not this is ethically justifiable to them. And in addition to that waiting period, just as a note, I would say that there should be an opportunity for that person to seek help. If that person wants to, as opposed to that, seek if there's a mental health issue, which very often there is. And I don't want to say this in an Orwellian sense of like, oh, the government, which is the biggest danger, of course, the government tries to say, oh yeah, this person, they're anti-government or they're anti-this or that, so therefore they're, mentally insane. The sadist mentality. I'd rather point at someone who has done these types of actions, potentially needing true psychiatric help from that bent. If they wish to seek that type of remediation and help, that could stay going to that island, and if there's potential progress, and that could also stay them going there. And why would there be benefits to that? I see other market incentives. Imagine the scientific research that's done studying the person who is a serial killer, the scientific research that's done by examining their past and their mind. And I'm not saying that these people should become like lab rats where they like strip open all their organs and just start playing around with it. I'm saying like in terms of the person voluntarily at that point saying that they'd rather seek out treatment options instead of going to the island. And of course, it's true. I'm going to admit that it does sound on its face, it sounds like very dangerous. It sounds like, oh my gosh, like, is that really like a market mechanism that could be carried out in voluntary fashion? Is that something that is ethical within libertarian ethics? This concept of that type of punishment, and I really could see that being okay the more evidence there is. And again, I think with technology as it grows and more people have surveillance cameras and business has surveillance cameras, I think it's going to become easier and easier for people to verify and corroborate when one person has committed a mass harm against others. It's becoming more and more difficult for people to get away. Oops, sorry, a little USB here, with murder. It's becoming very difficult. And that isn't to say there isn't also the other catch-22. What about evidence that is fabricated? Fabricated fingerprints, fabricated DNA. People that try to contaminate an evidence, sorry, a crime scene. An evidence area. That's a possibility too. Which is why I think this type of um, punishment or utilitarian means to removing someone who is very dangerous from the rest of everybody else should be done only with the most strong of evidence. And when I say that, I'm not talking simply, you know, maybe there's a hair sample in a room among others. I'm talking like there was video or there's, a type of um, confession plus, what I mean, all, blood and all this other stuff. Like, and of course you might be saying, and I'm going to agree with you if you're saying this, Jamie, this sounds really open and arbitrary. And I'm like, yeah, and that's exactly what current government criminal justice procedure is. It's open and arbitrary. Rules of evidence are just man-made things. Standards of proof are just simply man-made. Beyond a reasonable doubt is not a percentage. It's not a measurable thing. It's just people think of it as, oh, maybe it's 90 percentile confidence, 99th percentile. There's not really much to it. The laws are arbitrary. I'm just trying to bring together a stronger, safer, more equitable means to dealing with those who cause massive harm to others. We're talking about victims here. We're talking about people with violence against other people that leads to death or aggravated battery. We're talking serious bodily injury. This type of solution is not to be just for a bar fight or a simple harm or someone scratched or keyed your car or stole something. Like, this is supposed to be what is done for the most dangerous of dangerous people, like the kind of like Arkham Asylum, DC reference, kind of persons. And in that vein as well, the opportunity for research to be done as to what causes these things, what causes people to want to go on killing sprees or want to go on serial rapes or want to go and cause mass aggravated battery. So I think that there are market incentives for that, and I think that the more open and transparent it is, where it's literally like, I mean, shoot, like just like a Real Housewives episode or a Big Brother episode or I don't know, any other type of reality TV show like The Bachelor or something like that, where there's always cameras everywhere kind of thing. And it's not that there's people on the ground, but it's kind of like the Hunger Games in that way. Like, the bird's dropped off, there's cameras everywhere. Anybody can access it. It's open, it's public, so people know what's going on. They can see the evidences of what's going on. They can find people. And of course, again, with the issue of wrongful convictions, the idea is to help stop the things that the Innocence Project tries to fix, and that is people that are wrongfully convicted. And so, that's just a thought. What are your thoughts about that? The island theory, as opposed to, death penalty. What do you think about that as a private means? A big open island, plenty of resources that someone can live off of and create a life for themselves, or whatever, but they're abstracted from society. People can see it. There's, technology that's built in for that kind of thing. But that's the way to keep these people from recidivism, and to, as best possible without actually causing death, help feel a sense of retributivist punishment being dealt for those who are affected, the actual victims, the victims' families, friends, stuff like that. So, curious to hear your thoughts, and I'll talk to you later.